Hey, hello there. Welcome back to another great day here at MSA. So glad you could join us. Glad to see you. Today we're going to jump right in and start talking about good old Donald Trump, former President Donald Trump. Some interesting news came along that just have to share it because it looks like Colorado and Maine are not going to get their wishes and have Donald Trump removed off the ballot after all. Now, not saying that that's 100% permanent because that's still going to go up to the Supreme Court to have those decisions made. But what is currently happening is places like Maine's Supreme Court has jumped in and said, wait, don't do all that just yet because we've got some things to review here. You can't just take his name off like that. So looks like his name's going to be on there for Colorado as well as Maine, which is wonderful news because it's sad when people don't do enough of their homework and they just jump in and start making decisions for their people. I mean, you should have the right to vote however you want, correct? That's what this is. One of my favorite things is that when you hear people talking, they start talking about the threat to our democracy, the threat to our democracy. The Greek word for democracy is, I believe it's demokratia, and I probably don't say it right, but what it means is power of the people. And when I hear people keep screaming a threat to our democracy, it always seems to be the ones that are threatening our democracy the most. Don't you think? But that's my opinion, you know? Put it in the comments. Tell me what you think. And while you're there, if you get a second, hit that like button. We'd really appreciate it. So, what I'd like to do is roll a clip, let you hear some real interesting meat and potatoes, juicy stuff about this, but what the Maine Supreme Court said, what Trump's attorneys are saying about it, as well as when it's going to get to the Supreme Court and what we're looking at. And of course, the great news is that Trump's name is going to remain on the ballots in those states all the way up through Super Tuesday. That's a really good thing. That's a big thing for the caucuses. So anyway, let's just get to rolling the clip, and we'll be right back. See you in just a few minutes.
And heading over to the state of Maine. As you are likely well aware, Maine became the second state in the nation to decide to drop President Trump's name from the 2024 ballot. That was a decision that was made by Maine's Secretary of State, Ms. Ballot, who believes that Trump is not actually qualified to remain on the ballot due to her interpretation of the 14th Amendment. Essentially, her belief that President Trump, quote-unquote, engaged in an insurrection on January 6th of 2021. And so, in order to save democracy, she decided to not allow the 1 million voters in her state to have the option of voting for President Trump. However, just like over in Colorado, her decision has been put on hold. That's because just 2 days ago, a superior court over in Maine has put a stay on the secretary's directive. Here's specifically what the court wrote in their order, which, just for your reference, was issued on January 17th. Quote, "The secretary is ordered to await the Supreme Court's decision in Trump versus Anderson, which is the Colorado case, and no later than 30 days after Anderson's issuance to issue a new ruling modifying, withdrawing, or confirming her prior ruling. Legally speaking, a stay of an administrative ruling is a rare event in Maine, but the court agrees that under these circumstances, it is appropriate." And so essentially what happened was that the Maine Superior Court, they put a hold on removing Trump from the ballot in the state until after the U.S. Supreme Court issues a ruling in the Colorado case, because whatever the Supreme Court decides in the Colorado case will actually then be applicable to the rest of the nation. And as such, quote, "The Maine court ordered that President Trump would remain on the Maine ballot unless the Supreme Court found him disqualified to hold the office of president by March 5th. In other words, they fully deferred the decision over to the U.S. Supreme Court. Now, in the U.S. Supreme Court, in that particular case, President Trump's legal team has just submitted their legal brief. You can see it up on screen for yourself, laying out their argument as to why he should be able to remain on the ballot. And frankly, Trump's legal team did not mince words in their legal briefing, writing that, quote, "The court should put a swift and decisive end to these ballot disqualification efforts which threaten to disenfranchise tens of millions of Americans and which promise to unleash chaos and bedlam if other state courts and state officials follow Colorado's lead and exclude the likely Republican presidential nominee from their ballots." And then in terms of their actual legal rationale, Trump's lawyers went on to write in their legal brief that, quote, the court should reverse the Colorado decision because President Trump is not even subject to Section 3, as the president is not an officer of the United States under the Constitution. And even if President Trump were subject to Section 3, he did not engage in anything that qualifies as an insurrection. The court should reverse on these grounds and end these unconstitutional disqualification efforts once and for all. Now, notably, President Trump's lawyers, they did not argue whether or not what took place on January 6th of 2021 amounted to an insurrection, but instead, their contention was that President Trump did not take any actions that would, of their own accord, amount to an insurrection. Quote, raising concerns about the integrity of the recent federal election and pointing to reports of fraud and irregularity is not an act of violence or a threat of force. Trump's lawyers then go on to throw a bit of a curveball by writing that even if Trump is guilty of insurrection, he could still technically run for office, it's just that he wouldn't be able to serve in office. Quote, in addition, Section 3 of the 14th Amendment cannot be used to deny President Trump or anyone else access to the ballot, as Section 3 prohibits individuals only from holding office, not from seeking or winning election to office. Furthermore, aside from the legal brief submitted by President Trump's lawyers, the U.S. Supreme Court also received supporting briefs from individuals as well as groups who support President Trump's position that he should be on the ballot throughout the whole nation. And notably, among these so-called friend of the court briefs, you had one that was signed by nearly 200 Republican members of Congress. You had another that came from over 2 dozen Republican states, as well as another that was signed by the Republican National Committee. And in terms of their decision, well, the U.S. Supreme Court is working on a bit of an expedited timetable, with February 8th being the date that the court is scheduled to actually hear this case in person, meaning that oral arguments at the U.S. Supreme Court will be taking place about exactly 3 weeks from today. However, until the U.S. Supreme Court makes that determination one way or the other, well, the U.S. citizens over in those two states, over in Maine and Colorado, will be able to vote for President Trump this upcoming Super Tuesday.
Okay, you got to see that clip. Pretty interesting, all the little ins and outs going on there, the things that the attorneys said. I particularly like the fact that they didn't really try to dive deep into insurrection, what it is, what it isn't, but the fact that they said that, according to the Constitution's 14th Amendment, Section 3, his name can be on the ballot. It just doesn't mean that if he was actually guilty of insurrection that he could serve in office, but he could definitely be on the ballot. So it's wonderful when you get behind these things and it gets put into the Supreme Court's hands of the states, and they have to look and see what their people are doing and actually start making real decisions for the people of their state. To be able to take Donald Trump's name off of a ballot in Maine by the Secretary of State, who actually worked for the campaigns for Obama and also for Joe Biden. If you haven't heard any of that information, we're going to get to that in another story another day. But her decision to take his name off the way she did, that wasn't for the people that voted her into the office. Well, actually, I believe she was assigned into the office. I don't believe she was voted in. But either way, it takes the rights of the citizens away from them to be able to make freedoms of choice. And that's what part of the whole abortion thing is going on, and all the other things that go on, is people being able to make their freedoms of choice. And here at this channel, we firmly stand on the fact that people can make whatever choice they want, however they want to do it, and be able to speak freely about it. The difference is, if you're trying to hurt or harm people, it's really bad to try to step on other people's values and morals. But it is okay to have a difference of opinion. And that's what obviously the Secretary of State of Maine has when it comes to whether Donald Trump should be able to hold office or not. But it's not been proven in a court of law. He's never been charged with insurrection anyway. So what are you doing? Let the guy go. Let him do his thing. It's no different than what's been going on with Joe Biden in office. All kinds of crazy things going on. I mean, it doesn't matter if you like Biden or you don't like Biden. When you start putting two and two together and looking at a lot of the things that's going on, you're like, man, some of this stuff doesn't add up. But the main thing in this whole purpose of the story is the fact that it looks like Donald Trump's going to remain on those ballots. And we're going to keep moving forward with what we consider to actually be democracy, which is a wonderful thing. So do us a favor, like, share, and subscribe. if you get a chance, please share with other people. We'd really appreciate the spread of the word out there. And we look forward to seeing you again. Hope wherever it is, whatever you're doing, whatever time, day, night, you're having a great part of your life. And we're loving each and every one of you. And we look forward to seeing you again. All right? So you take care of yourself. We'll see you soon.